A group of Canada's COVID-19 experts says it is time to start rethinking the rules at the border and drop one of the government's most controversial measures. More Canadians are becoming vaccinated now and fully vaccinated, and the advisory panel on screening and testing is weighing in as a result on relaxing some restrictions and ending those quarantine hotels. Janice McGregor is in Ottawa to lead off our coverage. Tell us more about what the panel is recommending. This came out relatively late last night, Janice.
That's right, Heather. And I also want to be just clear off the top that this is yet another situation where we have an expert panel coming out with some recommended changes, some different ideas from the rules that are currently in place. But in the short term, the current rules remain in place. So anybody who has some travelers going to and fro in their lives should understand that nothing's changing yet. Nevertheless, let's take a look at kind of what this latest advice is, because I have to say, Heather, they are muddying the waters in a number of areas that have been the subject of a lot of discussion in terms of how passengers, returning passengers in particular, should be screened. They weigh in on how much testing is actually really required, how long different types of travelers should be isolating, and whether travelers who are now fully or partly, I guess you could also add, vaccinated could be subject to a different set of rules, providing the government could get some kind of a vaccine passport or certification system up and running. Of course, at this point, it doesn't have that. But as you say, the recommendation getting the most attention is the one to end the mandatory 3-day supervised quarantine for air travelers that requires them to go to designated hotels. Now, we have heard complaint after complaint about these hotels, how expensive they are for starters, how unpleasant they've been for some people, that there's been occasional crowding, bad food, how some people don't even feel they're safe because we've had some isolated reports of people being assaulted, and in a couple of situations, people who believed that they may have caught COVID from their hotel stay. And the other complaint about it is that it doesn't treat all returning travelers equally, because if you return to a land border, you don't have to go to one of these hotels. And so what we've seen is that air travelers are just flying to a nearby U.S. airport and then walking or taking some kind of a taxi service across the border to just avoid the whole quarantine hotel experience. Others were prepared to pay the $3,000 fine, so they didn't have to go there either. And so that's led a lot of people to conclude that they're just not effective. Now we have this expert advice suggesting they could be scrapped.
And the statement from that advisory panel was met by a statement from the public safety minister. What is the government saying about all of this now, Janice?
Well, it was interesting. Even earlier in the day, Prime Minister Trudeau was asked whether quarantine hotels should be scrapped, and he kind of stuck to the government's message all along. Look, guys, not the time to be talking about travel. Take a listen.
There is a point at which we're going to be able to say that. When that point arrives, will be based on the best advice of scientists, of doctors, of epidemiologists. We have allowed science to guide our decision-making every step of the way, and we will continue to. When the time comes, we all look forward to that, but it's still not time for non-essential travel.
No, it was interesting, Heather. He was talking to the premiers last night. Among that group, you have people like Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who's been asking for more mandatory quarantines at land borders, more testing of air travelers, not less. Reaching a consensus on how to manage travel has been difficult right from the start of this pandemic, and I would suggest the latest advice in this report just makes things even more complicated.
Thank you, Janice. Janice McGregor in Ottawa.